Hey, welcome. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about teenagers and mental health, and I also wanted to talk a little bit about suicide awareness with teenagers. And so, thank you. Enjoy. So, over the last few weeks, I have been contacted by a few parents, worried parents, about children who are really struggling with mental health and suicidal thoughts. And I've just also been away at the weekend with a group of teenagers, 15 to 18-year-olds, on the hill with Duke of Edinburgh and Scouts. And I just thought this was really relevant. I was reading an interview with Christopher Palmer, who's a Harvard psychiatrist, and he was just talking about mental health. And so I wanted to give some ideas today. So what I'll be doing is asking the question, why? Why is it that teenagers really struggle with mental health at the moment? And then how do we as parents help? What can we do to really support them? So I wanted to talk a bit about that. So this is a subject which is very close to my heart. As a teenager myself, I was deeply depressed, suicidal, and although I never attempted suicide, it was more in my 20s that I actually took a razor blade and tried to take my own life. I was feeling very suicidal. And in my teens, one of my best friends, he committed suicide while I was at boarding school. And that devastated me for many years. So for me, I really struggled with mental health. I struggled with depression, getting out of bed, just being in the environment that I was, boarding school. So yeah, so it's kind of really touches me, and I feel it's something we need to speak about. So some of the figures are about 7% of UK children have attempted suicide by the age of 17, and about 19% of US teenagers have considered suicide. And I've heard similar figures, especially during COVID. It's that males make up about 75% of all suicides, with about 25% being female. But an interesting figure people often don't speak about is that it's actually females who make 75% of the suicide attempts. And those are figures that I read and heard. So, it's just an interesting that actually it's not just a male thing, a male problem. So, yeah, what Christopher Palmer was saying is that 1 in 8 people currently struggling with mental health issues. This was an interview he did a few weeks ago. And he was saying that actually it's going to be a lot more now. And this is globally. So 1 billion people, he said, struggling with mental health problems. And why I see at the moment a lot of teenagers, in my perspective, of why they're not, they are struggling with mental health, why they're not in a good place, is because many of the things that are seen as the things to do, playing computer games, being inside on TV, as Christopher Palmer points out, they don't help us with our mental health. Being isolated, some of the other things, being sedentary, all of these things, they don't help. If I remember myself, the period I got most depressed as a teenager was when I injured my back and I couldn't play sport. But once I was able to get back into sport, my depression lifted. So yeah, these are really important things. So what Christopher Palmer talks about is that all mental health disorders are metabolic brain disorders. Yeah, all mental disorders are metabolic brain disorders. So what does that mean? That means it's to do with our metabolism as much as anything. So what he's really talking, and that's something we can come back to in a minute, is when we change our diet, we improve our sleep, when we move more consistently, then our metabolism improves and therefore our mental health improves. He talks about in his book this idea of this one lady who was struggling with schizophrenia all her life, and she changed her diet. She changed it from just everyday SAD, so standard American diet, and she changed it into a not macrobiotic. I've forgotten the word. It's not paleo, but essentially it will come to me. So she just changed her diet. So she moved to basically lots of vegetables and a bit of meat. So yeah. Yeah, so this is why, and I'd say another reason, and I was talking to my podcast guest on Monday, which will go live on Friday, about he did the film The Work, which is an amazing film about a group of men who go into a prison and help work with a group of prisoners. And it's just, there's tears. It's so profound. It's such a beautiful film. And he was sharing in his interview, said, that all vulnerability, our vulnerability is our superpower. And I see that a lot of our teenagers don't see that. And that leads us into the what we can do as parents is we need to start modeling it. We need to start modeling our vulnerability. And I'd say that's key. We have to do the inner work as parents, as adults. We have to show up. So we need to take care of our sleep, of our food. We have to model it for them. We've got to get ourselves into a really joyful space so that when they come home from the stresses of school, of life, they have a place where they can feel safe. It's a joyful place. But what I often hear from parents is they're worrying a lot, and I know a lot of my listeners to this podcast and this my videos, they say they grew up with parents who were very frightened or angry, and we know how that was. So in the same way that we would have preferred our childhood homes to have been a safe, quiet, loving space, we need to create that same space for our teenagers, for our children. And obviously it's much better if you've got young children. Great. This is the time to start modeling it, to do this inner work, so clean up, start going to bed early, right? Clean up your diet, start moving, get fitter, move more into a joyful space. I've been working with one client in particular who has, young children, and they're seeing how he's shifting because he's changing his diet. He's doing things like the EFT, the trauma tapping technique, the TTT, and they want to know what he's doing because he's transformed as a person. He's like joyful now, and therefore they've totally transformed as well. They've been able to grieve things. So it's like when you model it, there's a saying which says our children don't listen to what we say, they listen to what we do. If you're changing, you're doing, they will listen. So that's really important. So if there is a worrying or bad vibe in the home, you've got conflict with your spouse, do something, sort it out. Really acknowledge that there's so much you can do. Another thing, Christopher Palmer, he says, change your diet, get to sleep early. Exercise is like, go out with them, play games. It's like, right, we're going out for a walk around the reservoir. We're going to go for a walk. We're going to play some frisbee as a family or do activities together. Let's go and play squash. At the beginning, they might be resistant. I remember working with some young children when I was doing my teaching, my childcare work about 15 years ago. And at the beginning, they were so resistant to going outside. They just wanted to stay inside, watch TV. And I was like, no, we're going out. So I taught them how to ride a bike without stabilizers. We used to go and do these amazing adventures. And they loved it. It totally transformed them. So, it's just to keep going, persevering. What other things he says? He talks about fasting as well, really helps with mental health. And Warren Farrell, who wrote the book The Boy Crisis, he talks about the importance of weekly meetings. We sit in a table with the family, and each of us takes turn to lead. So, yeah. Would you like to lead tonight? And give that a space that we talk. Any issues which are present. Okay, yeah. And we have to model it rather than just saying, I'm fine. We've got to actually dive deep. Actually, no, I'm struggling at work at the moment. I'm stressed. Because our kids know that. Our spouses know that. So when we can really be honest, and our vulnerability is our superpower, actually, I feel really sad. It's the anniversary of my father's dying, or whatever it is. It's like we honor it and we model that, then we give permission for them to do the same. So, yeah. So that's why I really feel our teenagers are struggling at the moment. And these are just some ideas that we can do. And I think there's lots of things we can do. If you think of any that really helped you with your children, maybe they're older now, please do put it in the comments below. Yeah, really appreciating you. And yeah, I feel they are struggling at the moment. We are struggling at the moment. And it's for us to keep showing up. And the final bit I didn't say is community, right? How can we create, spaces to be in community, to be together? And that was one of the things at the weekend with Scouts and Duke of Edinburgh, is this groups of teenagers, they were off walking on their own. We were watching from afar. They were camping on their own, but they were hanging out. They were spending time with kids not on their phones. There was no phone signals. So it's like just being in that space is so healing. It's so healing. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for listening. And this is the first time I'm going to put this up on my podcast as an audio. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Okay. Take care.